Okay, thanks.
Great. Well, there's a lot of great questions. So to begin with, just thank you so much. And then the second thing is, I think that there's a lot more than we could reasonably talk about in the rest of our time. So I was wondering if we go around and kind of hear from each person, out of everything that's there, what's one question you would really enjoy us talking about today? And I think we'll have time for several. So we're not going to need to vote or anything, but just out of everything that you've read, what would you be most interested in having a conversation here? Now, the rest of the questions, we're going to be putting them in an FAQ, and Edwin and I are going to be sharing our best thinking about them, and then we're going to be inviting you guys to also share your best thinking about them. So, we hope to have a resource. So hopefully there will be some responses to those questions. I don't know about answers, because so often an answer is our own experience, and depending on the context and depending on the situation, but we'll definitely have a bunch of responses to all of those within a couple of weeks, something like that. But for right now, from the list, what would each of us like to talk about? And who would like to start and offer something? Myrtle.
Okay, so for me, I think before anything else, the beginning is important. So the first thing I would like to have an answer on is how to give an answer on any resistance in first becoming part of empathy circle, because that is something that we face most often.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
The question is that when someone is showing resistance in coming and becoming part of empathy circle, how to convince people and be part of empathy circle? That would be my first and the most important question.
Okay, so let's hear all of the questions, and then we'll figure out where to start. Okay, thank you. Yes, Salvador.
My question is how to help people to say back the words of the speaker, or expressing his or her own understanding of the speaker. Sometimes some persons say that they don't feel comfortable just repeating the same words, or they do that in a mechanical way. So it seems like that doesn't help anyway. But that will be my question: how to help the people to find the words, the adequate way to express their understanding.
Okay, thank you, Salvador. So let's go ahead and continue to hear the different questions, and then we'll see where we'll start first, and then we'll try to explore as many of them as we can today.
I don't know if this is helpful, but I actually was drawn to the same question as Salvador.
Awesome. Yep.
And I think it was a combination of Rita's question and Alara's question. How they put it, Rita said, when someone has difficulty just repeating what they heard and automatically add their thoughts or comments, how do you deal with it when it happens again and again? And Alara said, what to say to someone who is not reflecting right. So I thought that is really helpful to talk about.
Awesome.
Which is, I think, what Salvador is saying too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Eliza. Rita? Whoops, can't hear you.
I'm happy with the way you framed the question, all of you so far. Because when I was reading, I was amazed how all our questions are very similar. It seems really it's so hard to keep someone coming along the process in a way that they feel support and no judgment. And then the people resist coming and people resist the model. So how do we engage them with to trust it, to trust the process? How do we inspire them? That's the yeah.
How to inspire people to trust the process. Cool. Edwin, do you have?
Yeah, the resistance, how to give an answer to the resistance. Kind of feeling people not, I don't like the word resistance, but there's something in there that might be a better word for it, but so it's what Myrnal and Rita was saying.
Yeah, okay. So I also wrote down for my questions several about, let's see, so if I had to choose one, I think how to help people who are having a hard time offering someone else a listening reflection, which is close to Eliza and Salvador's. And so it seems like we have kind of two clusters. Mm-hmm. One has to do with resistance and one has to do with reflections. And so let's start with resistance. Given that that's kind of the first, like kind of before, just logically speaking, it's before somebody even gets there, and then we do the reflections. So your variation on the question, Rita, was how to inspire people to trust the process. And Myrnal, yours had to do with, you said something about how to convince people to try it who are feeling resistance. And Edwin's, the way you phrased it was,
one of the aspects was, I feel that there's resistance and I sort of take it on, and it's almost like I anticipate their resistance and I kind of project it back, which seems to reinforce it, sort of.
Yeah. So. Okay, so for our conversation today, I am thinking that we could use a variation of dynamic facilitation if you guys are open to and interested in that. And I'll just say a few words about that. Dynamic facilitation is a way of working with groups where we use a lot of reflection. And the person who is facilitating offers, so it's a group of people who have not necessarily learned reflection at all. And it may be a situation where we don't really have a lot of time to teach them, but we're working on an issue. And so the facilitator is the one doing a lot of the reflections. And the reason we do that, so like, for example, Edwin and Myrnal and Rita had some questions. And just the way that about this resistance topic, all of us have questions, but we have questions on different topics. And so we're starting with this one. There's a thing that can happen in a group that where if someone is asking a question and then someone else kind of has the answer and is like saying to them, oh, well, why don't you do this and why don't you do that? And like sometimes it can feel like advice giving. Like sometimes it's okay, but sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming and it can kind of shut down people a little. So one of the ways we go around this process is that we invite people, when we're doing the dynamic facilitation process, to offer solutions, concerns to the facilitator. So for instance, say, Eliza, you had a really great answer for Myrnal, and say you spoke directly to her, and then she would be like, yeah, well, but this can't happen. And then you're like, well, have you tried this? And it's like, well, no, it can't. And so it can kind of get a little stuck sometimes. I'm not saying it would necessarily, but I'm sure you've seen that dynamic with people, right? And so in dynamic facilitation, what we do is we're just kind of redirecting it to the front. And usually, like if I were doing it in person, the facilitator has some chart papers there and is just writing and reflecting back and writing and reflecting back. So, oh, you have a solution. If you were doing this, you would do da, 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 da. And then someone says, well, I have a concern. If I did that, then it might not work. And so it's just a little bit of a way to kind of depersonalize it so that people aren't just going at each other. And I'm not saying that you guys would be doing that, but we had talked at the beginning of the 6-week sprint, Edwin and I, that this might be a tool that we could use at some point to kind of facilitate a conversation. So if you're open to playing, we can go ahead and experiment. And so I would just be in the role temporary of the facilitator, except that I am facilitating an amazing group because all of you know how to do reflections. So I'm not going to do all the reflections myself. If somebody says something, I'm going to, first of all, invite them to say it to me, but then I'm going to just see, well, who might want to reflect that? So we can all share the reflections. And so I'm still going to be in the facilitator role, but I'm going to be inviting lots of help. Okay? So we're kind of doing a little bit of an experiment here. So who has an idea about this issue of resistance and what might be helpful? Eliza.
One idea is, and I know that this, I'm just going to say the idea. Because we're just brainstorming. One idea is that people would be invited to come and participate or not participate. Just come to be present and kind of see from exposure that it's safe.
So I'm going to reflect that back to you, if that's okay. So you're saying that you would invite people to come and they don't actually have to participate. So I'm now imagining here, because I'm trying to understand. So like you might have like a small circle with the people who are participating and some people behind who are kind of observing so that we know who to ask, you know, and we don't like ask a person who may not want to participate. Like, look, is that along the lines of what you're picturing?
Yeah, I think it would be like that with the, and maybe even so they don't have to be stressed out about it. They can, like, once you, because another thought I had is everyone's in a circle, but if you're not going to participate, like you have your palm down or something, you know, like you're holding, like there's something that indicates it. But then I'm thinking that they're going to sit there the whole time being like, should I, or shouldn't I, should I, or should, you know, and they would miss it. So in that case, like if that was the option, it might be best for them just like this time, don't worry about it. Just hang out, see how it works. See, like you're a silent listener in this one. Feel what it like it's a baby step thing. Like feel what it's like to be a silent listener. Now maybe you want to, participate in a more verbal way. So kind of expanding the silent listener role in a way.
Expanding the silent listener role by making it so that if you're there, that doesn't mean that you have to reflect. You could just be observing. And then you had something with hand signs, which kind of made me think about cards. Like, you know, if someone is looking for a listener, everybody who is willing to be a listener can hold up a green card. And then you know who to choose from or something. And if you don't hold up your green card, no one's going to call on you or something like that. Hand signal cards. But that somehow we would be signaling if we are open to being a listener. And if we don't want to, we can just observe. Is that
and I was thinking even more about being the sharer. Because I think people will probably be more comfortable being the sharer. I think listener, but where people may feel vulnerable is being the sharer.
So your concern is that people might feel especially vulnerable if they are expected to say something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So trying to I think the resistance, that's where I imagine the resistance is coming from. Like, But I don't know, maybe it is a resistance to being a listener too. That didn't occur to me.
Okay. Yeah, I think it kind of connects to the other topic that we're talking about, is that if the listener is offering listening reflections, and if people feel like they don't necessarily know how to do that, then that's where some of the resistance might come in. Okay, thanks so much for your thoughts, Eliza. Any other thoughts sparked by that about how we can help lower resistance? Yes, Edwin.
It seems to me that there's a variety of resistance. It's not just, one resistance, but there's a lot of like components to resistance. So it seems like laying out the different areas, kind of articulating the different areas of resistance would be helpful.
So you're saying it would be helpful to make distinctions amongst the different kinds of resistance, and you mean ahead of time, or do you mean just asking people?
Yeah, kind of creating a resource to kind of address, like there's one, what are the different moments of resistance that people have had? I kind of don't like the word resistance somehow, but I'm looking for, there's another, it's like looking from the person's point of view, like discomfort or something. There's also kind of reusing a different word, and I'm not sure what that word is, or stress or tension or something. So it's kind of like reframing, having a different word for the word resistance, but that's one part.
Yeah, so you're making a very important point here, which is that resistance is what it looks like from our perspective.
Yeah.
But if we reframe it to what it looks like from the other person's perspective, we might find a different way of talking about it. I know in dynamic facilitation, we talk about it as concern. So just, it's not like somebody's resistant to an idea, but they have a concern. So that's what we use.
Yeah, that's a nice word out there. That's like, so what are people's concerns? So, for example, one concern I heard was from a therapist who said, this is like kindergarten. It's like, I don't want to take part with this. This is like baby steps, baby stuff. And so that was their concern. That was too simplistic, but yet they're the one that kind of controlled the conversation. If we don't use the structure, they're the one who take all the space and don't, so I don't know. It's kind of like a so, yeah.
So that was an example of somebody whose concern was that this process is too simplistic. And yet from having interacted with this person before, your experience was that without having this kind of structure, they tended to take a lot of the airtime. So even if they thought it was a simplistic thing, it was still helpful as a way of kind of helping to manage their contributions.
That's it. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this topic of resistance / concerns? Yes, Salvador.
In a similar direction that Edwin talked about, I can identify some different feelings that a person may feel. Like, for example, a person may feel fear because she or he feels exposed with other people, or fear because other people may can make judgments or reject him or her. Also, some people may feel ashamed sharing something personal, or other people may have some past experiences that didn't work with acceptance and respect, so they are afraid that there will be something similar. Or some people feel unable to share with the clarity or what they feel, or when they are in a listener role, they feel unable to express the understanding. So I try to find out how the person feels and in relation to what situation feels that. So I
Yeah.
find something to tell her.
So,
Could I
Salvador.
reflect that?
Yes, that would
So
be great.
just so that you're
Awesome.
not taking it
Yeah,
all.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I was hearing, Salvador, that there's a variety in terms of the concerns. You want to build on that, and you laid out several different concerns that people might have, and several of them deal with fear. So a person may feel fear because they feel that they might be judged, or they'll feel ashamed about sharing personal material, or they've had like a past negative experience, like something, was painful experience in an empathy circle. So they're kind of like, that kind of creates a sense of fear, anxiety. And also there's a feeling of maybe being inadequate. Like if I'm doing a reflection, I might feel inadequate in terms of doing a good job. So you're starting to kind of lay out some of these different ones. And I think there was some more that I didn't get, but.
Yes, yes.
I also heard Salvador say something about that depending on which one. So he's kind of trying to figure out which one of these is active for the person, that depending on which one, then he will know how to respond, something like that. So he can customize his response based on the situation.
Yes, before I say something to help the people, I try to understand. And maybe I will ask a question to hear more about the difficulty that that person is experiencing. So I may understand better, and then that helped me to find out something more appropriate for that person in that particular context.
Okay, just to reflect that. So you try to see which one is, which experience are they having, which feeling are they having, so that you can respond within that context to that specific comment or that specific experience that they're having. And you try to understand first, and then you can respond.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Myrtle? You're on mute.
Okay, so continuing on the concerns part, there was one very peculiar concern that I heard from people, and that was that when you go into empathy circle, you don't come out with a solution. And that is one concern they have.
Yeah, I would say that's true. We're not necessarily doing empathy circle to get a solution.
Yeah. So that was one of the concerns to show that why should they be, becoming part of something and become vulnerable when they're not getting a solution out of it.
So their concern is, why should they become vulnerable being a part of something if they're not going to get a solution out of it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm realizing I would love to participate. So could I, Rita, could I have you as my listener? And because I want to share an idea, and then I'll go back to being in the facilitator role. Yeah? Is that okay? Awesome.
For sure.
Yeah. So let's see. This whole thing about resistance. So I guess one of the things I'm thinking about is something I heard a long time ago at some kind of sales and marketing seminar that was talking about how our job was not to make a green apple turn ripe. Our job was just to figure out which the ripe apples were and to pick those. So it was more of a sorting, right? So if there's a tree full of apples and some of them are ripe and some of them aren't, we're really just trying to see which ones the right ones are. So that's really stayed with me. Like, for myself, I have a hard time with the word convince, because I feel like if someone doesn't want to do something, there's a really good reason for it, is always my assumption about it. So I like Salvador's thing about trying to understand what their discomfort is, or what their reason for it is, and then after, I think for me the first thing would be modeling. So just letting that person know that I hear them. So I would be practicing empathy and saying, oh, so you're concerned because you're afraid that if you do this you might feel exposed. Okay. Do you want to know more about that and how likely or unlikely that is, or not? Like I might just really put it in, make sure that they feel that they're in the driver's seat. Because I think that sometimes the more we try and convince somebody, the more resistance they get. And so that kind of brought me to when Edwin was saying something about how when we're concerned about resistance, we can kind of be unconsciously projecting it or creating it or something. I don't remember exactly, but he was saying something about how we can be helping to create it. I think sometimes almost like the more we try and get somebody to do something, the more they might dig in their heels. So I would want to be careful about that, and just share information with people and say, oh, if you don't want to do this, that's totally fine. I want to respect that. And if you're interested in it later on, just let me know, and kind of move on to the next potentially ripe apple. So that was my piece.
So with the symbol of the apple, and taking the red and the green, the red being ripe for what, for taking in, for being eaten, maybe. You are sharing the idea that, and I think it's in response to the word convincing, that you find uncomfortable because you remember of that symbol of the apple, and you want to take the one that is ripe to enjoy and play with the process. So having said that, there is also the word resisting that you are concerned with, and going back to what Salvador was saying, you like that concept of asking more in order to know what the person, what is the reason the person, and you are also saying there is a reason why they don't want it this time, and maybe they just red, they're just green. So you're playing with those concepts that you wanna. I think this was what kept coming in what you were saying, to go with where people are, and in order to give them a taste. I'm still staying with the apple. This taste of what empathy is, just doing that and saying, so you are concerned, and being interested in their own experience without, I think you meant without the intention of convincing them, but just being with them and showing them what empathy means from within.
Thank you, Rita. I feel heard.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Eliza.
I really like etymologies. They really help me understand things. So I found some interesting ones in relation to the words that we've been looking at. So resistance comes from holding back, and fear comes from calamity or danger. So when we look at those, it's like we're holding back because we're afraid of a calamity, you know. So that's what we perceive as resistance is someone holding back because they fear a calamity. And then concern, we didn't know, but is to sift or discern. So it's almost this process that we're inviting for both ourselves and for the other to sift through the fear they have in order to decide whether it's useful or not, you know? I just thought that idea because I have, for some reason, a reaction against the word concern, where I'm always like, what does that really mean? Like, I have a concern that, you know, and I was like, why? You know, but if concern means I want to sift through this a little more to discern why such and such, as Salvador was saying, is happening, then it feels like more of a collaborative process, you know? And also convince, it makes sense you don't like it because it comes from to conquer or defeat with an argument, which I didn't know. And whereas accept is to take. So I thought that was really interesting because what you were saying, Rosa, is like accepting what they're saying to you, you know, accepting what the other person is saying to you instead of trying to convince them. Like in that way, modeling empathy, I'm just basically reflecting back the way that what Rita reflected, but modeling like, oh, I'm just going to take you in and not try to change you, not try to conquer you, not try to do anything, just, and then see how that feels for you. And like, anyway, so those words were really helpful for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Eliza, Edwin, would you be willing to reflect on Eliza?
Okay, so what I was hearing there, Liza, is that when you address issues like this, you really like to get into the etymologies. What do these words mean, kind of the foundation of them? And so you were looking at the word resistance, and that mean that it's kind of like a holding back because you're fearing of a calamity, something really bad happening. And then you had the word concern, you had initially not really kind of resonated with that word because you didn't know what that really meant. But as you looked into it, you're seeing that it's about sifting through about why something is happening, and that it's more of a collaborative process. So it sounds like you're kind of warming up to the word concerns. And then you were looking at the word, let's see, not confidence, convince. And convince means to conquer. So that was like, oh, that doesn't sound very empathic. So let's not try to convince people. And then kind of you're saying, oh, accept, accepting what people are saying, kind of having a more empathic listening approach so the word accept resonated with you in that empathic approach.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what I'm kind of was noticing and what everyone was saying is this. So we notice somebody who has a little bit of fear, and then just to sift through it with them with no agenda is what it seems like, and that they're going to have more fear if we're like, no, you've got to do it. So kind of on our part, just that idea of attraction rather than promotion, I guess.
Yeah, attraction rather than promotion. And along these lines, I want to say that I want to hold compassion for the part of us that does want to convince, because I think that there's a positive thing underneath, right? If we're wanting to convince a person, it's because we're so excited. We're like, oh, this is really good stuff, and this is going to help you. And it's like I think about when I was first learning about alternative health and alternative healing and all that, and there were people in my family who had certain illnesses, and I really wanted them to learn that there were herbs and that there was diet and that there were these things that could help them, and because I wanted to help so much. And it was hard to realize that even though I wanted to help, that they weren't ready for it, and so that was a hard lesson. But I like this last thing that you said, Eliza, about attract rather than convince, or because I think that we can take that good seed of why we're excited and why we think it's good and just say, hey, you know, I love this practice because of this, and I love this practice because of that. And if somebody says, oh, I don't know, you know, we can say, oh, you have a concern. Let's just, you were saying something about open-ended exploration, to be open to engaging in an exploration with them, but not attached to whether they decide to go for it or not. Yeah.
Yes. Would you like a reflection?
No,
it seems like you just reflected me.
I think I'm good with that. I saw a little bit of a hand wave by Myrtle, so I wasn't sure if there was more that she wanted to add or anyone else.
No, I'm good. In fact, I'm happy to be listing all these words, because these are certain things that have kept me away from a lot of things that I walked away from. And that is, they were trying to promote and I wasn't convinced that why they're promoting. Yeah.
So now you have some empathy for the person on the other side. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah. So yeah, this is one last thing on this before we shift then. But I also want to check in with Edwin and Rita and see if there's more about your concern. But this thing about attract instead of promote that you said, Eliza, somebody, I forget where, was sharing this image of being a flower and just, you know, kind of attracting the bees and the pollinators, and that our job is just to continue to, you know, put out the love or the radiance about what it is that we enjoy, and not get crumpled because some people aren't interested. Like, our job is just to love the beauty that we love and just continue to put that out there and trust that the people who will be attracted to it are the ones who need to be attracted. So Edwin, Rita, are you fine with the conversation on resistance / concerns? Is it okay to move on? Do you have any?
Yeah, I can move on. I was just kind of reframing the questions, like how might we attract people to take part in an empathy circle? So I just made that state. So it's like another design question out of this.
Yeah, and I think that thanks to everyone's participation, we have a lot of wonderful statements on video about what do I love about an empathy circle. And we also have a lot of statements about the vision of our larger purpose for why we're doing empathy circles, because we have a vision of what we think that this can contribute towards. So I think both of those will be good responses to that question of how to attract people to empathy circles. Yes, Rita.
Yeah. I think to wrap all that, I like the concept of the conversation going to us, just walking the talk, and offering the tool, whoever you, like the therapist can only give the tool and the person will only use it the day they are ready. It's the story of the apple. And I think our biggest, I don't like the word power, but the best way we can inspire people is by having no expectations of them, and having empathy for wherever they are. And I think this will allow them to be curious without thinking they need to jump in with their feet before they're ready. So thank you for this conversation.
Thank you, Rita. Who would like to reflect Rita's closing statement? Yeah, Eliza.
You feel like it's important you really like this framing of accepting people as they are and not pushing them, and just saying, if that's not right for you right now, then that's not right for you right now, and that's great. Does that feel right?
Totally. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a whole bunch of other questions that are clustered around this issue of when somebody has difficulty repeating words back, and when somebody is not reflecting accurately, or all this stuff around reflection. Like, how do we help people learn it? And what do we do when they're adding a lot of their own stuff? Or like, how does that whole thing work? So I want to open it up and see if anyone has thoughts about how do we help people learn reflection, and how do we support them when they're maybe not doing it exactly the way we would like for them to do it. Yes, Myrtle. Oops, you're on mute.
So I see this as the biggest challenge that maybe if I was in that situation, or I might be already doing it, is that sometimes when people fail to reflect or become judgmental is when they start connecting things with their own life. So that is perhaps the reason why they become judgmental of a certain things that the other person is saying. And why they go out of turn is why they cannot stop from reacting is they feel that, one, either they'll forget what they have to say, or the reason I see is that sometimes they just want to make a point, or they're on a battle of their own, again connecting it with their past or certain experience where they might have felt something similar, and they just want to assert it to themselves that, oh yes, this happened with me, and this is perhaps the right way or the wrong way of doing it. So I think it's sometimes the reason that a person is not reflecting the right way, apart from the communication issues, is this personal conflict that the person is battling constantly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Myrtle. So you're pointing us to understanding some of the reasons why somebody might be having a hard time staying with the structure or reflecting in an accurate way. And you were saying that they might be connecting what they've heard to something in their own life.
Yes.
And so they might also be feeling like they'll forget. So like they can't wait until it's their turn because they might forget. And also they might be wanting to make a point right then. And so it sounds like you're saying that the more we understand what's making it hard for people, then the more we can address it more.
Yes.
More.
And just one point I wanted to add here is that sometimes when we see reflection or any kind of communication, we go and assess the the shallow part of it, that is the surface of it, that maybe the person's communication skills are not right, the person is not a good listener, or certain things like that. But we forget the deeper hidden reason behind anything that is happening. So yeah. I mean, that is the highlight point that I wanted to say here.
Yeah, that it's important to not judge somebody too quickly, but to understand that maybe there's a good reason that they're having a hard time doing something.
Yes, and this actually, I think last week itself, I was having a conversation with my mother, and she was having all these complaints to make to me, and all of those things about whatever she was facing. And I just barged in and I said that, Mom, what, you have to tell all these things all the time? And then she told me something that, see, why I went out of turn is because I fear I'll forget. It was very simple, but I just got annoyed that, why she just kept keeping, going on and on and on and doing complaints and all of those things. But that small statement just gave me a whole new perspective into the thing. That, it's nothing great. It's just a simple thing that she fears forgetting the thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this experience you had with your mom just really helped you to understand that somebody can have a simple reason why they're doing something or going out of turn. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So were you in a conversation with your mom where you were doing some kind of empathy circle?
Yeah, I keep doing that. It's every time that conversation is an empathy circle, but if it goes on and on for a very long duration, I lose the empathy.
Yes. Yeah, of course. That's very understandable.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, Eliza.
I had a thought that it might be nice to start an empathy circle with just very simple statements, just for people to really get the hang of it. Like if we did it just a very quick, like back and forth 4 times. If I was said, Rosa, would you be my listener? And then you say, yes. And then I say, I like bananas.
Oh, bananas is a favorite food for you.
Yes, and I love coffee, but with cream.
And you do not like drinking coffee black, but you love it with cream.
Right, and I feel so heard and understood right away. And it's very non-controversial, and it just might be a really very grounding way of just getting people into understanding what it is.
Yeah, so you have a suggestion that starting with something very simple could be a good way of helping people practice and get grounded and feel comfortable. Yeah. And you just gave us a demonstration. Thank you. So, any other thoughts? Yes, Salvador.
If the people in the circle have no previous experience in an empathy circle, I might say that being empathic means trying to understand how the other person feels, thinks, and value from his or her own perspective. And that what we want to do in the empathy circle is to show, in a way, our understanding about how that person feels, thinks, and behaves. And that we have a communication process in the empathy circle, and we can pay attention to 3 elements through which we communicate each other. One of those elements are words, and most people are used to pay attention to words. But there are 2 very important elements. The second one, I call it the music of the speech. And I refer to that the tone of voice, the volume, the rhythm with which a person speaks. Because sometimes the music of the speech changes the meaning of the words. I can say, for example, hello, or I can say hello. And the third element is the expression of the body with gestures, postures, and movements. And all these three elements are important to express and to understand. So when I try to express my understanding to a person, I'm trying to say the words that the person said, but also I try to convey with my music of the speech and my gestures and movements the main meanings that I grasp from the other people expression. And then I may show some examples just to clarify all that I said.
Beautiful, Salvador. So you've just offered us a mini teaching piece of how you might introduce the concept of what we're doing in empathy circles with people who have not experienced empathy before. And so, not who have not experienced empathy, who have no previous experience with listening reflections.
Yeah.
And so the way that you would present it is to focus on our purpose here is trying to understand how the other person feels, thinks, and values things from their own perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that we want to try and understand, and two, we want to then show our understanding back to that person. And we want to show our understanding of how the person is feeling and is thinking and is behaving. And that the way we show that understanding, you have this wonderful three-part process where one is words, the second is the music of the speech, so the intonation and the volume and the rhythm with which the person is speaking. And then the third one has to do with expressions of the body, and those include gestures, postures, if someone is slumped over, or, movement. So if somebody's like fidgety, impatient. So all of those are part of the expressions of the body. And so that you think it's important that we be listening to all three of those. And when we're wanting to help a person feel that we are understanding them, that we use all three of them in our communication back to them. And so you would offer some examples to people of this to make it a little bit more concrete as a way of introducing empathy circle.
Thank you, Rosa. I feel very well understood.
Thank you, Salvador. Yes, Eliza.
I really resonate and love that sentiment, and then it raised a question for me about empathy circles that we haven't really experienced here so much, but that sometimes people's disposition and their language is mismatched. So what are we reflecting in those moments? Like if I said, I like bananas, you would be like, you seem to like bananas, but you also seem mad, but I didn't say I was mad. So you can't really reflect that back, or like, well, I just love people. It's like, well, you seem to really love people. I don't know. It's an interesting question because I know in my life, I'm very conscious of those things as well. And I made a choice to read them all and then choose the one that allows me to connect most deeply to the person where they're at, and it's usually, you know what I mean? So, it's usually the words. So I think that's actually maybe I'm answering my own question. That's one of the really great things about empathy circles is that we're reflecting back the words so then they can actually hear. Like I know with my aunt, she's always saying things in an angry tone. And it really stressed me out to hang out with her. And then one day I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to listen to her tone. I'm just going to listen to her words. And then I realized we actually agree on a lot of things, but I just couldn't hear it before. So that's an interesting thing also, like we're reflecting back the words as first and foremost, I guess, in some way. Or I guess that's my question. Are we reflecting the words back first and foremost?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So you're pointing out to the challenge, Eliza, about what do we do when there's a mismatch? And sometimes people might say something in an angry tone of voice, but their words aren't necessarily angry, but their tone of voice is. And part of you thinks that it might be helpful to just ignore the tone and reflect the words. And then you also are curious about what to
Yeah.
do. So
Yeah, or if somebody's used to being very sarcastic, I mean, I'm sure may come out at some point. Like, I don't know. It's just an interesting, we're
yeah.
so pure in our group, we're all just like, we are very pure in our communication here. And so it didn't occur to me till now that it might not be that way always.
Yeah, that's a great topic. I'm not going to try and respond to it right now, but I am going to definitely say that in my mind would make it onto the advanced empathy circle list, right? Like, how can we deal with situations that are challenging, such as, right? Um, and I'm very open if other people have some responses. I just want to, for the moment, appreciate your bringing up the question. Yes.
Yeah, I had a comment. This was back to Myrna, what she was saying about her mother. And my mother's the same way. It's like she just does not listen. It's like, and she said the exact same thing, that she says, I will forget what it is that I'm saying if I don't say it right when it comes to me. So she's like really worried about the things that's coming up in her mind that she will, not be able to say, that she'll forget it if she has to listen to others. So you can't talk. I mean, a conversation with her is this one way, just her constantly speaking about whatever's coming up in her mind. And no matter what you say, she doesn't even kind of hear it. So it's very frustrating. And but I did a mediation, in the family and she was part of it. And I spoke to her, in the circle, and I said, when you tell these long stories, I get lost. And then I said, would you reflect that? And she says, oh, that's too much for me. I can't remember what you said. I said, okay, when you tell these long stories, I get lost. And then she says, oh, it's so confusing what you're saying. It's okay. When you tell long stories, I get lost. He says, you don't want me to tell long stories or something. I said, no, when you tell long stories, I get lost. So then it went on 5 minutes from me just saying this one sentence, and she says, oh, you get lost when I tell long stories. I said, yeah, you got it. So it was like, but it took almost 5 minutes for her just to, and then it was also her way of saying, oh, it's so confusing. It was so funny. So anyway, it was like right on the mark with what you said. So that just kind of remind me of it. And, anyway, I just had to share that because it's something I've been dealing with, in my family. And everybody says that she does it with everybody. So it's not just, with me. It's just kind of a general way of being, almost. So anyway.
So Edwin, you found it helpful to be persistent in using a very short message to ask for a reflection and to be persistent. And it was successful after a lot of effort.
Yeah, and it also felt really good. It was like, oh, I've finally been heard. I mean, it's like, oh, you finally got it. The essence, the pure essence of what I said. And it felt like this, connection kind of door opened up between us. So it was just very gratifying.
Very satisfying, and you felt like it really opened a doorway of connection between you. That's beautiful. I'm so glad that you shared that story, Edwin. That's powerful.
Yeah, thanks.
And now we have it on video.
Yeah, I'm going to send this to her.
So I would like to take a turn on this topic. Myrtle, would you be willing to be my listener?
With pleasure, Rosa.
Thank you. So I'm realizing, so part of me is freaking out a little bit because I'm going, oh my God, we haven't really included this in the empathy circle format. We've just kind of taken it for granted that people will know what a reflection means. Yeah, so I'll just, if I could have a reflection of that right now. Oops, I think your screen might have frozen.
Taken aback after this discussion that, initially reflection was taken for granted when, planning of empathy circles was being done. And now this has come to the fore. It has become one of the most important topics of discussion, that reflection is one of the key things to consider when we plan an empathy circle.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there for the beginning of empathy circles, so I don't, and there's been a lot of work. I mean, I haven't read the whole book that has been written on it by the person who Edwin used to work with, but I just mean like in terms of our updating the one pager. We kind of took reflections for granted, and I understand because a lot of us have had a lot of training in reflection, so we kind of assume, okay, everybody knows how to do this. But I'm actually really excited that we have Salvador's intro here on video, because I do think that having a one-pager specifically on reflection will be a useful thing to add to the toolkit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what I hear you say is that you're really excited now that, finally after all these discussions, Salvador's inputs, the intro video is there, and all of those things are going to get compiled, and we'll have a one-pager document entirely on the reflection bit. And you're also a little surprised, thinking that, initially when the one-pager document for the empathy circles was being made, everybody kind of assumed that reflection would come naturally to everyone. And because of the, the backgrounds of the people who are participating here in the design team, reflections didn't occur to become such an important part of the one-pager document when we were designing the empathy one-pagers. Now you are very excited that this is going to make an entire document in itself.
Yeah, thank you. So I have been thinking a lot about how to help people learn reflection, and one of the thoughts actually did make it into the update, which is that the idea of modeling. So the idea of starting an empathy circle, and if it's just us and we haven't had a chance to work with other people before, we can invite somebody else to go first and pick us as their listener. So in our listening, we are modeling. And then we say that to people. And then at the end we say, okay, so I've modeled what listening reflections are, and now I'm going to pick someone else. And then the other idea that did make it onto the new version of the one pager is that I think it could be really helpful if we start empathy circles in teams. So if before we start an empathy circle, like say that Rita was my friend and she's never done reflection before, but I'm like, Rita, I want to start this crazy thing called empathy circles, and can we have a little empathy listening back and forth, because I want to show you what an empathy circle, what an empathy reflection is like, and you can just talk for a little bit and then I'll reflect, and then I want to talk for a few minutes and have you reflect, and maybe we'll do it a couple of times, and then when we go and start our empathy circle for the demo, one of us can be the speaker and one of us can be the listener.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're modeling both the speaking and the listening. So that was another thought.
Okay. So what I hear you say here is that two things which went in the updates and you're happy about it is, first, the modeling bit, that people can choose us as the models to exhibit how to listen, how to do the active listening bit of it. And the second part is to do the team exercise. That is, picking up one of the friends and doing to and fro the rounds of empathy, listening, and speaking, so that people get a feel of how to do an empathic listening and how to speak and give other person a chance to, reflect back during the conversation.
Thank you. And so in this conversation, I've been thinking that something to mention is that we could even extend that and let people know that, if we're doing a small empathy circle, 3, 4, 5 people, part of the empathy circle process could be to have an intro conversation with each of those people, where we are doing one-on-one modeling empathic listening and then asking that person to reflect back to us, so that by the time we start the first empathy circle, everyone in the first empathy circle has already had a one-on-one experience with it. So that's another possibility.
Okay. So as an extension, what you are proposing or what you are thinking as an option is that people get a chance to do small circles wherein an intro conversation is the opening conversation for the circles, where everybody in the circle, new or old, gets a chance to be the speaker and the listener at least once before the real empathy circle, starts.
Yes, almost, except that I meant just one-on-one without the group. So like if all 5 of you were going to be part of an empathy circle, I might make an individual appointment with Edwin on the phone and just have a conversation where we're doing the listening and reflecting. And then I would the next day schedule a conversation with Eliza, and the next day schedule a conversation with Rita. And so in these conversations, I'm saying, I would just want to give you a little taste of what it's like to be in an empathy circle. So we use a lot of listening reflection. And instead of trying to explain it a lot, I'll just model it. So do you want to tell me about something really good that happened this week? And then I'll reflect back to you what I'm hearing.
Okay.
And then after you do that, okay, so now would you be willing to have me tell you about something really good that happened this week, and have, you just practice reflecting back. What did you hear? So I would do these like one-on-one individually with people. And then my sense is that might make it a lot easier when all of us get together in a group.
Okay. So before going into the groups or the small teams, what would be a better idea to start with is have a one-on-one conversation with the individual members who are going to be the part of the empathy circle, and give each of them the taste of being the listener and the speaker, so that when the real circles start, everybody is comfortable, they know what a speaker does, what a listener does, and they don't have any anxieties about any of those things.
Yeah. Thank you. One last one, and then I'll stop. I have not done this so much yet, but a friend of mine does this. His form of doing listening circles is one person goes and they have a listener, but then everybody else also gives a reflection of what they heard. And so then we all get to see how different people give reflections. And so each person who speaks gets 3 or 4 reflections. And I'm thinking that variation would be really good for people who are really wanting to go deep into the nuances of giving reflections.
Okay, so one variation that you have in your mind or that you can think of at this point is one of your friend does this, and that is that when one person speaks, the rest of the members, all other 4 or 5 members who are part of the circle, each of them reflects one by one. So there are like these multiple versions of these reflections on, and the person who wants to go deeper, this can be a really good idea to, have multiple reflections and see how different people have understood the thing that the person is trying to communicate in the empathy
Yes,
circle.
thank you. I feel heard. Thank you so much, Myrna. Wonderful. Any other thoughts? Yes.
I'll go.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So while I was listening to you, this thought was coming to my mind, and I just thought that I would just share this, that when I did the empathy circle, so initially people had these apprehensions of, how the empathy circle would go, what is empathic listening, what is speaking, how to share the idea, a lot of these questions, because this was the first time they were coming across this idea. So what worked for them was, I tried the same thing as we do in our circles, that is do check-ins. And I call them check-ins. I didn't say that these are empathic communications. I just said that these are check-ins. We are just going to know each other better in this first round, where each of us is going to check in with perhaps the high note of the week, and that's it. And that just made everybody very comfortable that, oh, this is how listening is done, this is how speaking is done. And then it was a smooth process. So I just wanted to share this idea.
Thank you. We don't have that on our one pager yet to start with check-in, so we'll need to add that's a good way of introducing people and helping it be a smoother process if they start to practice listening and reflecting with a high point of the week. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Myrna. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're almost at the closing time. So unless there's, one or two more comments, we could go into our closing circle.
And maybe one small comment is something that people find reassuring, is that when we tell them you don't need to agree to what the person is saying, for some reason, people think that if they repeat something that they are so thinking the opposite, it doesn't come out. So giving them that relief, I suppose, is sometimes helpful as well.
Thank you, Rita. You're reminding us that often one of people's concerns about reflecting is that they think there's an implied agreement there. And if you can make it explicit that just by reflecting back, that does not mean that you are agreeing with what a person says, that can be really helpful. Thank you for that. Yes, Salvador.
If the person who is listening feels unable to saying back, reflecting, I might say something like, this is like swimming. If you are going to learn how to swim, at the beginning, you can swim. You make some movements, and little by little, you are learning how to coordinate all your body, and then you start swimming. So maybe you would like to try and see what happens. You don't have to be completely right or have to be perfect. You just try to start learning how to swim, and in this case, how to reflect what you are understanding.
Beautiful. So, Salvador, you've used this metaphor that helps the learning process because you compare it to swimming. So at the beginning, people are just making different movements and it might not work, but pretty soon they all get coordinated and it comes together. And so you're giving permission to people to be a beginner, to just try, and you're giving them the confidence and saying, you will get this eventually. It's totally fine to just try, and as you do some of these movements, eventually it will all come together and you will be swimming. In this case, you will be doing a listening reflection.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, great. It's always helpful to have a whole bag of metaphors that we can draw from. Yeah. Great. Okay, so let's do closing round. Something that you are taking with you from the session today, and if you have it, one place that you might or just what might a next step be for you with empathy circles. So something that you're taking away and a next step if you have one.
Well, I can go. So I see this sort of unfolding like this, all these different aspects. So it's really nice. It's almost like my brain is like expanding through everybody else to create this this space of these different ideas that, you know, to give shape to for doing an empathy circle. And so the next step is I'm thinking of something like a more systematic, a paid web page to lay this out kind of systematically, and I'm not quite sure that we're doing the empathy circles in the, you know, in the Saturday. I'm doing it a lot, so I think there's a lot of stuff jumbling. So the next thing is for it to sort of percolate and then kind of start taking some shape, and somehow having an event that I'm moving towards, and then have that as a real project to be implementing this. So there's a real need, so deadline, like here's the thing, we got to get this ready for these people. So kind of make it real somehow.
Thank you, Edwin.
Thanks.
Yes, Eliza.
Something that keeps striking me is it's not actually maybe so much to do with empathy circles, but it's to do with how English is the default language of this conversation, and how amazed I am at people who can speak so many languages so beautifully. and just I'm just so in awe of that, and so also so grateful for that. I for some reason it makes me want to cry, just that we all are able to come together, and inspiring in my desire then to learn more languages. So English is not the default language. So that is one thing I'm very conscious of right now, and grateful for. And another thing is in terms of next steps, that several people have kind of been talking about empathy circle communication as a way of life. And so I'm interested in bringing empathic, I mean, I think I do it, but more consciously bringing empathic communication into my life, and then looking at the moments when that's the way that's of service to communicate, and then the moments when that's not the way that's of service to communicate, you know, when reflecting is helpful and when reciprocity is helpful. So or addition. So just becoming curious about that, because ultimately the empathy circles is kind of a tool to bring into the world, not just something to do in isolation. So so I'm excited to explore that discernment.
Thank you, Eliza. Salvador?
I feel invited to write about these topics. I realize that I do some activities that I have not so much written in Spanish. So with all these ideas and perspective, I'm really excited about writing and putting them down. So to have a way to share that with more people.
Yay.
And I know that I have my commitment to send some of my materials, so I hope to do it at the beginning of next week, as soon as I go back home.
Great, thank you so much. All good things in all good time. Vernal?
Okay, so as always, a lot of things to walk out with. One thing is, I'm very, very grateful that today this conversation reminded me of something that I feel myself, and that is, do not push something, do not promote something, let it just flow. And that is something I'm walking out with. And as part of the next steps, because I'm working in the space of mental wellness, and there are these stigmas around all of these things. So for next steps, I would want to explore how empathy and empathic circles can be incorporated into various models, wherein these things can become the active part of day-to-day life, so that people come out of the self-inflicted pain that they have with respect to their emotions, and with respect to understanding of others' emotions, and having a lot of misunderstandings between relationships and all of those things. So that is somewhere I see I would be working, taking this forward too. And just to share, I have this company that I have launched already a couple of weeks back. It's titled Galore Us. And in that, the spell is Galore. E stands for empathy. And that's something I'm already doing. And I'm just going to get myself educated further on this, and spread this as far as possible. Yeah, so that is on the next steps. And just before closing, I want to connect back to Edwin, and on the mama issue. I just want to close it on the happy note. So like Edwin closed it on that single statement, it took me half an hour to to actually close that, and multiple statements. One of them being, Mama, please give the other person chance to understand what you are trying to say. And she actually took had a hard time understand that. I give you all the time, why don't you understand? You will never understand. So it was like a to and fro, half an hour conversation. And after that, she got convinced that yes, she has to give me time to breathe in between and understand what she's trying to say. So yeah, Edwin, thank you for saying. It just saved me from the guilt that I was living in, that I don't give my mother the patient ears to listen. So now I know that this is very common, and this can happen. So thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Thank you, Myrna. Rita?
I think that each of us come with the. I really enjoyed seeing that we had our questions were so similar when we started writing. One little gem that I'm taking along is how do you describe, Rosa, when someone gives advice, how to deflect it and bringing in I'm going to see if I'm saying it right, is so if you were in that position, that is what you would do, and or that is what has worked for you. Is that what the intention of?
Yeah.
Okay. That's really powerful for me as a facilitator in general. And going forward, looking at you, Edwin, for Saturday, getting the feedback and the learning from that attracts me a lot, because it's what you're doing. It sounds very grassroots, and but really not the easy one where people are in a family. It's you're going in the intensity of the action, and it's yeah, it's exciting, and if it the way it's gonna work is gonna be a learning for all of us, I assume, and I'm grateful for that too. On top of everything else, thank you.
Thank you, Rita. So what am I taking with me? Highlight of today. I am so excited by all the various questions. I feel that we have the very good, solid beginnings of a frequently asked questions list. And as I said, even though we only addressed really 2 issues here, I think that they were pretty big issues. And then the other questions will be coming up with some responses and creating a document that all of you will be able to continue to add to. So I'm just really excited about how much is getting created through this group. And my own next steps will be to work on that FAQ. And yeah, I feel very, very grateful for the opportunity to connect with each of you. Next time will be our last time as this particular group, and yeah, really looking forward already to finding ways of staying in touch with each of you in some form or another.
And thanks, Rosa, for facilitating the space too. Really grateful for that.
Okay.
Oh, and Martin, just saw there was an email from Martin. He said he apologized for not being here. He was driving back from London and got delayed. So he sent that.
Good to hear from him. And I'll be thinking of you on the 15th, Edwin, and really sending good energy to you. And yeah.
Keep an eye on the news.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye. Till next week.
Bye, everyone.
Best wishes, Edwin.